grab me a beer and grab him a coke. We bout to sit for an hour, bullshit and tell jokes. And please don't mix it up, cause he done sobered up. Brandon T Comedy on your social media feeds. And Brandon Taz here, is your ex drinking buddy. Brandon Taz here, is your ex drinking buddy. Brandon Taz here, is your ex drinking buddy. Brandon Taz here, is your ex drinking buddy.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of Brennan Tassif is Your Ex Drinking Buddy. I'm your host, Brennan Tassif. If you're new to the show, quick rundown of the show. So one of my favorite things to do when I was out drinking, doing drugs, running and gunning was to hang out with friends and reminisce about old stories, share crazy insights, and just be an overall great drinking buddy. I'm sober now, but that's still one of my favorite things to do, hang out and talk shit, talk shop, and reminisce. Most weeks I will be joined by a guest. This week is no different. I am joined by my friend from the West Coast, co-founder of the Anulo Network, podcaster extraordinaire, overall smart, intelligent man, Farzad. What's going on, man?
Thank you, sir. That is quite the intro. How's it going, buddy?
It's good. It's good. So plug everything up front. I know you have the podcast network. Plug all that stuff and all your social media, anything you want the people to know about.
Yeah, so you can follow the network at anulo.co. Our merchandise is shop.anulo.co. Sorry, we have a little bit going on that I immediately got triggered into. It's our podcast network. We have 4 shows. There's Anulo, which is our flagship, where 5 of us, Greg, Scott, Kyle, and Joe and I do a weekly podcast. We stream it on Twitch. And then there's Who Does a Pod, which is currently on hiatus. There may be a season 2. You didn't hear that from me. And then our famous sports podcast featuring Joe and your host here, Brennan Tassif. And we also have a neuroscience podcast by friend of the show, Amiel Moreno and Leah Crevitt. And that comes out bi-weekly.
Okay, so do you want to plug any of your social media up front?
Oh, yeah. You can follow me on social media anywhere at Doing It for Science. Usually
Doing
on
It for
Twitter.
Science.
Yeah, Doing It for Science. Usually it's me shitposting on Twitter or usually like me eating food or beer or just traveling is my Instagram mostly. Okay.
Well, that's beautiful, beautiful. So a couple of things right up front for everybody. It was a running joke on the network how I've only had Joe on because he's my co-host for the other show. And then we moved to New York. I kind of got unpacked, and then I was like, oh, I don't have an episode banked for this week. And I was like, wait, Farzad's always bitching that he hasn't been invited on the show yet. Let's get Farzad on. And Here you are.
Indeed, dreams have finally come true.
So I kind of wanted to talk to you about just how you founded, because the Anulo Network is a newer thing. It was founded during the pandemic. That's how I met you and Joe and Scott by Scott and Greg and everybody. So I kind of wanted you to go through how the happenstance of the whole thing, how it worked, because I know we all listen to the After Disaster. I've had Ty on. I've had Mike Carano on. Anderson's coming on this month. So that's something we all had.
I hope he's not too busy.
That's something that we all had in common. And then we started doing those Friday night Zoom calls during the pandemic, which we got through on Facebook, and then just take it from there of kind of how all this spawned.
Yeah, so basically it was just, I was sitting around bored as soon as the pandemic started, early on, and I'm like, well, I'm going to be stuck at home. I want to be social. And I think it was some YouTuber I was watching did a trivia thing. And I texted Greg. I'm like, hey man, you want to do some weird Discord trivia? And so yeah, he joined and we had a good time. And I'm like, hey, what if we do a Zoom and then we can just invite other Pabs and just hang out on Friday nights because nobody's doing anything.
Yeah. And I found it interesting because, so for those of you listening, Farzad and I have been listening to the After Disaster since its inception, right? Have you been there from the beginning?
I was a paid member of the Loveline podcast, and so I got early access to the ADs initially.
Okay, and I remember listening to the Film Vault way back when, and Anderson mentioned he was going to start a new podcast with Mike Carano, or he was going to start something with Mike Carano, and then he was like, oh, well, I think we're going to try to do it after Loveline. So I started listening at episode 0 or episode 1, something like that. And so you and I have been around from the beginning, but I was living in Florida at the time, and obviously Loveline and the After Disaster and all that's based in California. So you actually personally had met the guys, so you knew them. You knew a few of the bigger fans like Greg and Scott by Scott, like people who were associated with the show. You had met years prior to all this.
Yeah. We'd met, I think Greg and I initially met at a grouper screening.
Okay.
I think, I forget which one it was, but I think we saw each other, a bunch of times at, a bunch of the screenings, and so that's how me and Greg connected.
Okay, and then you guys got on the Discord and then just kind of figured, well, let's just invite everybody?
Yeah, well, initially I was like, yeah, Greg, let's post it to the Facebook. I wasn't really using Facebook at the time. Greg was more plugged in. And so he blasted it out, and people started showing up, and that was the sort of, from that, I think on one drunken night, Joe wanted to do a podcast with Brennan, and then somehow it got changed to Kyle. And
well, that was one of the big things. It was a running bit for a while, but I was super pissed because I obviously am sober, but everyone was hammered, and it was 3 a.m. my time, so it was midnight your time, but everyone was kind of getting a little sauced up. And then I remember we all started talking.
Sauced.
Yeah, and then we started talking about doing a podcast, and I was like, oh, that's a great idea. And I was really pitching it hard, and then I left because I was on the East Coast and it was getting late, so I left. And then come to find out the next week, you guys had started one without me and you guys, and I was like, wait, what the fuck just happened? And so Joe felt bad about it, and then everyone was getting pissed because we started doing the Zoom call, and I came in, I think, in the second week. I really didn't say anything, and then by the third or fourth week, I was it was a thing that I did every single week was hang out with you guys. And then I think I was super pissed initially, jokingly, but I was kind of mad. And then Joe and I would always talk sports on the Zoom, and everyone would always be like, oh my God, seriously, you guys? So then we started doing Cheers from the Press Box a few weeks after you guys started A New Low. But it's interesting because the whole premise of A New Low is basically a spinoff, obviously, of the After Disaster, but it's just, I mean, you guys have bits and, things like that now, but when it first started, you guys would just all talk over each other and cut each other off and never finish stories. And
yeah, it was as though we were birthed from the same show. We had the same DNA at first. We've sort of gelled. There's some initially, the first few were kind of disastrous, but now it's sort of streamlined. We've got show bits and segments now, and it's a pretty streamlined thing. And the best thing too is that the best thing to come out of the whole Zoom and everything, the network and the podcasting is fun. We recently did a trip to Vegas, and
talk about that.
Yeah, that was it was a great time. It was nice to actually meet the guys in person, and
just
we all
side note for all the listeners. I don't mean to interrupt, but again, just like the fucking original podcast, you guys planned a trip to Vegas in the middle of my fucking move.
Yeah.
So I remember when Vegas got brought up, I was like, fuck yeah, I'm down to go to Vegas. And then again, 2 weeks later, it's yeah, we're going to Vegas these dates. And I was like, you guys know when I'm moving. Why would you do that?
It's just I guess it's a constant thing when we have to shaft Brennan somehow.
Yeah, it was. So twice now I've been on board 100%, pushing the idea, and then I get screwed out of it. So yeah. I'm very, what is it, Steve Wozniak to your guys' Apple. What's his name? Fucking Steve Jobs.
Yeah, Steve Jobs. There you go.
Yeah. So the Vegas trip, let's get into it. So you have no qualms about drink. You love to drink. Mm-hmm. You do imbibe in the alcohol, and then you also, you dabble here and there when it comes to different other illicit substances. So you have quite a few stories. But before we get into the ones that you sent me, I wanted to talk about the Vegas trip. So what were kind of the highlights? Because for those listening, the old way of podcasting is obviously everyone would get together and you'd invite your friends over, or, you would invite guests on and do it in person. But now with the pandemic, we all were doing everything over Zoom. So, you get a decent mic and a recording device. It sounds like everyone's in the same room, so it's not a big deal. But you had never actually met a few of these people in person. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, I had met Joe and I hadn't met Kyle in person. Scott I'd met briefly, but I'd never really really hung out with him.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and then
yeah,
Amiel and you had met Emily before though, right?
I had yes. So yeah, Emily I'd met before. We'd hung out, and Amiel I'd met briefly at the AD 500.
Okay. Which was in
Uh,
in Vegas.
That was also in Vegas. Yes.
I do have my shirt from that.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I didn't go, but I have a shirt. So what was the highlights of Vegas? Because I remember seeing a lot of the pictures in it. It kind of warmed my cockles when I saw it because it was kind of cool to see everyone hanging out. And, I was sorry I missed it, but, not that sorry because I'm now living in New York City. So it wasn't that big
Yeah.
of a
No,
loss.
it was worth it. Yeah.
It was an interesting trade-off.
Yeah. No, it was a great time. We spent a lot of time in Scott's room. Mostly
He
smoking.
got like a suite, didn't he?
He had like a patio that they actually had a little ashtray there for us, so it was great for us smokers.
Okay.
Scott, who is not a smoker, was trying to smoke a cigarette, and then for the rest of the trip, he was just having an unlit cigarette in his mouth to join
there
us
you
outside.
go. Yeah.
Yeah. The Hates were absolutely wonderful. So that was like the first time we all hung out together was at the New York pool, and everybody was already a little tipsy when I got there. So
Okay.
it was everybody was just filled with love, and Mr. Hate is such a big hugger. Especially when he's drunk, all he wants to do is hug, and he's exactly like he is on the Zooms. He's like, "Come here, brother, I need to give you a hug." He's the best. He was also kind of like your country boy bumpkin because he just kept standing in the pool, looking at the New York building. Like, wow, these buildings are so tall.
I actually find myself doing that. Everyone says you're not a New Yorker until you stop looking up, but every time I turn a corner, I always feel like that scene in Gladiator where I'm like, I didn't know men could build such things because it's pretty insane, especially because where I work now. Obviously, we don't mention where I work, but I work in a pretty nice restaurant in Tribeca. But the train I have to take dumps me out right at the World Trade Center. So you walk by the memorial and stuff, but then you walk by the Freedom Tower, and if you stand right near it and look straight up, it makes you so dizzy because it's so tall.
Damn. All right.
Yeah. And so it's one of those things where I can understand where Mr. Hate's coming from, where I'm kind of, Jacksonville's, the downtown isn't obviously a massive city, but it's got tall buildings, but being in New York is a totally different animal. So I could see him being in Vegas at New York being like, what is this?
Yeah. It was kind of like that. And on the Ferris wheel, he was enjoying himself. Yeah, we ended up doing the high rollers the following night. It was that night after the pool. Never mind. I got yeah, it was just all a blur.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun. Joe could not handle his heights at all.
Yeah, he's
so
not
he just
good at
sat
heights.
Down. He was just sat down the whole time. Even though he came outside, and I guess he was sitting on the patio bench because Scott's room was on the 69th floor. Ironically.
Oh wow.
Yeah. His room number was also AD. It was very fitting.
69 AD. There you go,
69
baby.
AD. Yeah, it was, and that was taller than the high roller on being on that patio.
Oh really?
Yeah, you could see over it. You could see clear over it. It was
And
much
Joe had no problem on the patio, but when it came to the high roller, he wasn't having
Well, he didn't. He was freaked out that me and Emily were in between the the suicide bars that prevent you. They were just hanging out there doing gymnastics.
Oh god,
and they were
freaked the fuck out.
Yeah, they were not having any of it.
God, that's terrifying.
But
so
there
all
is
in
a video. It was wonderful. Sorry, there is a video of Joe and Scott singing Maroon 5 together, and it is absolutely
hammered?
adorable.
Were they hammered?
Yes, 100%.
Of course they were. Love it. I love it. So, like you said, with the network, that's something that's been going strong. You guys have over a year now under your belt, correct?
Yeah, we just did episode 61, I believe.
Okay,
we just posted that last week. So yeah, it's been over a year. We've got a good thing going.
Yeah. Well, and it's fun too because I know this just from my experience with Joe and some of the dealings with the network, but sometimes in the Discord or on Twitter, some of you guys seem like you're fighting constantly, and then when we all jump into the chat, it's like, oh no, this is just theater of the mind. Everyone's just messing with each other.
No, we're all exactly. We're all just messing with each other. That was like the funny thing. It's like at the end of it, Joe wanted us to pose for like our match pick, and it was just like,
oh yeah,
it was pretty funny. Like we were like, oh yeah, we forgot that we were supposed to fight.
Well, you did mention earlier when you excuse me, when you were talking about your Instagram, you do like to travel. Mm-hmm. And since I on the bonus episode, if you're not on Patreon, go ahead and subscribe on Patreon, and you can listen to the bonus episode where Joe and I break down the move to New York City and the hellscape that was. But you sent me a list, which I appreciate. I did want to talk to you about some of the travel drinking stories you had on here. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I want to start with the furthest one away, which was Germany, Frankfurt. Mm-hmm. You just put locals bar, and then what is this, a Gute Stute?
Gute Stute, yes.
Okay, so what is that?
One of the benefits of my real job is I get to go to a lot of different conferences, and this particular one happened to be in Frankfurt. And my boss at the time, we were just looking for a place to drink after the conference, and so he looked up a place on Yelp, and he's like, yeah, this is not too far from the conference center. And, looking at the pictures, it seemed like a normal bar. And there's
doesn't it always seem like a normal bar?
Totally normal, and but then there's a picture of a taxidermy horse with this bald old guy just like laughing. We're like, oh, okay, that's a little creepy, but all right, whatever. So we're like, all right, sure, let's go there. We show up, and it's just like an apartment complex, and like this completely vined-in garden. And we're like, all right, is this the place? And then, like, in between the vines, you can kind of see, like, the sign for the Gute Stute. And so we walk in, we go to this basement of this apartment building.
Is that the name of the bar?
It's the name of the bar, yeah.
Okay. I thought it was like some weird thing where you got shit on or something.
No, yeah. We were just like, okay, Gute Stute, whatever. And so we're, like, going into the basement of this building. We walk in, and it's this tiny little basement. Half of it is taken up by this giant taxidermy mare.
Okay.
Which we come to find out that Gute Stute means good mare, and the old man is the bartender.
Oh wow.
And there's no seats at the bar. There's swings hanging from the ceiling as like for your seats to saddle up to the bar, and there's like barrels you can sit at. And the little garden in front is like their little patio area. And it's just like enclosed with all these vines. And there's like these picnic tables and everything. And so he's like this very, angry German man, as you'd expect. Whatever, being racist against Germans.
It's okay. It's Germany. You can do that.
We walk in. We're like, yeah, can we get like, some beers? And the beers are like a euro. Like a tall glass of beer. €1, which is $1, like
$1.50
at the time, yeah. So we were just like throwing like euro coins down. He was just bringing us beers, and so we were just having a good time. And one of my colleagues shows up. He had brought his daughter with him, who was 14, I think, at the time. And so he was like, "Yeah, I know it's legal here, but you ain't drinking. I'm sorry, I'm not dealing with you drunk ass. So you're only getting water." And so they go down to get some beers and a water, and they like. He comes back. He's like, dude, that guy gave me like the dirtiest looks. He just kept going. We like kept asking him for a water, and he's like, huh? We're like, yeah, water, Wasser. And he's like, he kept giving us the stank eye, and like he reached the back of the fridge and pulled out like the dustiest bottle of water he could find. And pours like a tiny glass. He hands it to us, just giving us like the weird stank eye. And I'm like, oh, well, that's weird. And so it comes to my turn, and I go down to get around, and we kept telling like his daughter about the horse and like with the swings and stuff. So she comes down to come check it out with me, and I do the same thing. I'm like, yeah, can I get some beers and a water? And same thing. He goes like, huh? And I'm like, water for the lady. And he goes like, oh,
he thought you guys
for
were
her.
Okay, yeah.
So then he like pulls out like a fresh bottle of sparkling water, and it's like champagne, and like pours her a giant glass and hands it to her. And it was
you thought your friend was trying to punk out, and like he was just getting a water instead of a beer.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it.
What
apparently was.
Dick.
So then he was like all about it, and he was like, okay, and he like brought champagne. So yeah, it And it was it was this like amazing locals place. Like he had like a sixth sense for like the locals.
Yeah.
Whenever they're like the drinks would hit like a certain amount, he would just appear with fresh drinks.
Oh wow.
It was crazy. It's a beautiful little bar. We went back like another. I went back last time I was in Frankfurt. I was like, yeah, I got to go to Gute Stute. The place is fucking awesome.
How many times have you been to Frankfurt?
I think I've been there twice. Is it twice or three times? No, twice. Yeah.
Okay. Did you end up like doing anything like stupid while you were at Gute Stute?
No, just getting. That was like the oldie thing. Was a guy that's just like this weird like old angry like German man who just is like, but also is like has a beautiful heart. But yeah,
well,
it's like weird.
That's a weird thing too, because I don't travel very much for work. Like when I was like a traveling trainer and stuff, it's different because you work in like the real corporate world with your day job. So is it one of those things where when you go to conferences, because I remember, like I said, when I would go to open a new store or something like that, like we're in the service industry, so we'd all get fucked up and do drugs, and no one batted an eye because that's just what we do.
Yeah.
Work hard, play hard, baby. But because you have like a very, buttoned up job, do you have to still be on your best behavior, or does it get wild sometimes when you guys do the trips?
Oh yeah, no, we still have to be on our best behavior, but pretty much everybody in management is drinks. Like there may or may not be a boss who dropped my name at a local bar here in San Francisco to get some free martinis.
Oh, really?
So we have a healthy drinking culture, and so usually at conferences, they're like wheeling and dealing at these like bars and stuff. So we'll like run into a lab director who's like talking to someone really high up in the government, and we're like, oh, okay, yeah, let's just sit over here and not.
I see. Yeah. So they're making moves and stuff.
They're making moves and stuff. So it's part of the job there to like, especially at conferences, to like it's a nice little lubricant for everybody to like meet, share ideas, and like it's research too. So like it really helps to get researchers drunk and get them to like argue. And then you can just leave and have your own conversation.
Yeah, right. So you guys never go off the rails?
I may have done something once, but I may have accidentally called. I was flirting really hard with with someone higher up, and ended the conversation, I think, by calling her darling or something. And
these are not people, because I know what you do. Obviously, we're leaving it vague for the listeners, but you work. Let's just say
I work in research. I'll just put it at that.
In research, maybe for people that are very powerful. So I don't think "darling" is a term that gets thrown around.
No,
much.
you don't say that to someone who could potentially be paying for your research.
Yeah.
So
hey,
that
tits. Hey, sugar tits. Let me talk to you real quick. I need a grant to do this, so why don't you cough it up there, Tootsie Roll?
Yeah, it was pretty embarrassing. So I think the following year I made myself very scarce at the conference around her.
Yeah.
And then I think the following
then you got to see him again.
Yeah, exactly. So like I think, and then the following year I think she was there with her husband. And and so then I introduced myself, and she's like, I remember. I'm like, yeah, I just want to say I'm really sorry. I didn't mean anything by it. I genuinely apologize for my behavior.
That's so funny because you're dealing with such powerful people that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I do that sometimes too, working in some of the restaurants that I work in, because they are fancy schmancy places, and sometimes I'll have guests come in. And they'll be like you're talking about. They're they're doing a deal. They're making moves. They're selling a company, buying a company, acquisitions, hostile takeovers, all that kind of stuff. And sometimes I forget, and we'll get to like chatting. Like I'll never engage a table unless they engage me. But if we start to talk, sometimes I forget that I'm the server. That we're not friends.
Right.
And it's very easy to kind of be like, yeah, so totally, and like get into something, and then they look at you, and you're like, oh yeah, sorry, I could space this whole interaction.
Yeah, no, it was very embarrassing, and it was not fun.
You gotta, because the field that you work in, every conference you go to, she's probably there, isn't she?
Thankfully, I only got to see her. This was like a particular conference that happens once a year. So
Okay.
it's the only place where it's the big one where everybody like sees each other.
Oh, okay, I see what
And
you're
so that
saying.
was and so that was thankfully I didn't have to see her any other time.
Where else have you been other than Frankfurt as far as outside the country? Like you've been to Asia and stuff like that too, haven't you?
Yeah, so again, this is one of the wonderful benefits of the field I work in. I've been all over the United States, but also yeah, Frankfurt. I've been to northern Italy. I'm at a conference in Bologna, and so after that, I spent some time and spent a couple days in Rome. I've been to Cambridge in the United Kingdom, and then as a result, spent a couple days in London.
Oh wow.
Did a conference in Uppsala, Sweden, which we were reading up on the Wikipedia page was the fourth most populated city in Sweden. So we're like, oh, it can't be that bad. It was fucking empty.
Oh,
Nobody
really?
was there. And we're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's the fourth most populated in Sweden. So you got to
Yeah,
take
and
that
we were like,
into
oh, in
account.
Sweden. Oh,
Yeah, it's not like the fourth biggest city in America.
yeah, and so that was fun. We actually ended up spending some time in Stockholm after that, and that was a ton of fun. Yeah, all of them. Yeah, I've been to Kobe, Japan. That was for another work thing. That was a lot of fun.
Okay. God, see, that's so interesting because I don't even have a passport. Like, I've never been outside the country. So to me, it's fascinating. And another thing, too, it's funny because now that we're in New York, Savannah, obviously, everyone knows her, friend of the show.
Friend of the show.
She was talking about going to see Niagara Falls, and she's like, "Oh, but we got to go to the Canada side." And I was like, "We can't. You can. I can't."
Yeah.
And she's like, "Wait, what do you mean?" And it's like, "I'm not allowed in Canada because of DUI. I believe it's because DUIs are considered felonies in Canada." But I remember, I'm going to bring this full circle. Watch how good I am at hosting. I remember one time in the Zoom call that you started, we had an after disaster listener from Canada who was like in law, like a legal assistant or a lawyer or something like that. And I remember she was in there one time. It was like the third or fourth Zoom call. And I remember just picking her brain. I was like, wait, so how do I get back into Canada? Like, how can I ever get into Canada? Because Just for Laughs, which is a huge comedy festival, is in Montreal. And she said, well, it has to be 5 years after you're done with everything. So probation, all that stuff has to be over with. Then you have to wait 5 years. Then you have to write a letter to the magistrate, fill out a bunch of forms, and then pay $5,000 to get cleared to go back into Canada. And I was like, okay, there's plenty of other comedy festivals.
Yeah.
Like, totally not worth it. And then I made a really erroneous joke to Joe. This is back when Joe and I were first getting to know each other. And I was like, oh, I got to do all my racial humor for you. And I remember I'll never forget. I did one of the jokes and she rolled her eyes and then we never saw her again. She never came back on the Zoom.
She never came back.
So I think that was
so
incredible.
you were the cause. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, entirely my fault. 100% my fault. But you do mention you travel so much for work, but you also you live in San Francisco, correct?
I do. Yes. The city by the bay.
Yeah, and everyone who listens to A New Low or knows Farzad in any capacity knows you have an undying love for San Francisco. There's a point of contention whenever anybody brings up another city. You're like, yeah, I mean, I guess, but it's not San Francisco.
I do. The smug rolls in every night, and I can't help it.
Yeah, you do love that place, but you did mention in the list you sent me. You did mention a story about you put it under traveling stories, but you said San Francisco drinking.
Yes.
So I didn't know where you were going with that because you had it in the travel drinking section, but then you do live in San Francisco, so I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, so being a San Francisco, I shouldn't say that. I'm not a San Franciscan, and I'm a Bay kid, but I've been living in San Francisco for 6 years now. And I became a total Bay Area hipster when I got introduced to Fernet, which is this Italian liqueur that's primarily drank in San Francisco and Buenos Aires. And specifically, if you're from San Francisco, you do a Fernet and ginger, like ginger pack, like a ginger ale usually.
Yeah.
So this
So
ties
do you
into
do a shot and then do a ginger back, or do you mix it with ginger as a mixer?
No, you do it as a back, but you don't shoot the Fernet. You sip the Fernet.
Okay, like in a snifter. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a shot, but it's like, yeah, you sip that, and then you can like the ginger sort of like clears any aftertaste, and it's a very like strong liqueur, and a lot of people compare it to Jaeger. I think that's completely wrong, but whatever. But it is a very licorice-y flavor, and it's not for everyone. Beyond that,
No, it's for San Franciscan fucking hipsters. That's who it's for.
That, and also apparently it's heavily drank in the industry, like it's a bartender's drink. Outside of that.
Yeah.
So this ties into the whole travel thing, because one time in Vegas, I was at a bar. Nobody was there. I ordered a Fernet and ginger back. The bartender's like, "Sure, man," and he reaches in his pocket, and throws down this coin. I'm like, "What the fuck is this?" And he's like, "Hey, man, where's your coin?" I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And he's like, "Oh yeah, no, this is a thing. The Fernet gives out these Fernet coins." And I'm like, "I have in my entire life, being from the Bay, that's not a thing. That's totally not a thing.
Not a thing.
Totally, you're bullshitting me right now."
You're making this up. Put your sobriety coin back in your pocket.
Yeah, what are you doing? Yeah, this is some bullshit. And he's like, no. So apparently, Fernet puts on these events in various cities, and they mint these like challenge coins for every event that they put on. So there's apparently, he was telling me about how apparently he has a San Francisco coin, a California coin, a Las Vegas coin, and a Nevada coin. And like the one he keeps in his pocket is like his Nevada coin, and he keeps like his other ones like locked up in a case. I'm like, that's absolutely insane. That's totally not a thing. And the whole point of him throwing it down is that all the bartenders carry it with them, and so you're all supposed to throw it down, and the person that doesn't have their coin on them buys a round of Fernet for everyone at the bar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, that's crazy. Never heard of that in my life.
Did you get a coin? Did you figure out how to get a coin?
I've been trying to figure out how to get a coin. I haven't heard of any Fernet events going on, especially now during the pandemic. Came back to the city, asked a bunch of bartender friends about it, and they're like, yeah, totally. You're full of shit. That's not a thing.
What?
Yeah, they're like, yeah, no, you're totally full of shit. That's not a thing. That's totally not a thing. I'm in London, right?
Oh, no.
I go in, find the hipsterest bar I can find, and I walk in, and I'm like, yeah,
that checks out with
yeah, exactly. Something called like Forget Me Not or something like that in the most hipster neighborhood that I could think of. Anyway, it was, I go to the bartender, I'm like, yeah, can I get a Fernet and ginger back? And he's like, cool, man, how long are you visiting from San Francisco? And I'm like, bitch, how'd you know I'm not from Buenos Aires? He's like, because you didn't order a Fernet and Coke. That's what Buenos Aires does. San Francisco does Fernet and gingers. I'm like, oh, okay. And then this one bar back was just giving me shit. He's like, oh, you're drinking ginger? That's fucking minion. I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with drinking ginger ale. What's wrong with that? And so I'm like, after he like pours it to me, I'm like, hey man, let me ask you a question. Do you have a Fernet coin? He's like, oh, mate, yeah, here it is. And I'm like, that's not a thing. No one has Fernet coins. What is this thing? Yeah. So apparently it's international. It's like excludes San Francisco.
I was going to say everyone knows about it except
everyone knows about it. It happened to be same thing in LA. Like I asked a bartender in LA. He's like, oh yeah, dude, I got my Fernet coin right here. I'm like, it's not a thing.
It's not a thing. I've been in the industry for 18 years and I've never heard of this. But again, I don't bartend, I serve, so it might be different.
Maybe in your drinking days it may have been more prevalent. But then again, I don't know how you would have fared on Fernet.
Yeah, I don't. Especially if you say it's it kind of got a Jaeger licorice kind of a taste to it. So the only thing I ever did that was kind of a liqueur based was Rumpelmann's.
Oh yeah, okay.
Because it was 100 proof, and it was the bars that I used to go to was like $5 a shot. So it's ice cold. You just pound it, tastes like Christmas, and you do 3 or 4 of those, and then you do a couple mixed drinks, and you're good to drive home. You know what I'm saying? Ow!
There you go.
So, speaking of drunk driving, I did want to bring this up. It's something I forgot about until you started talking about San Francisco. You tend to like to bike ride a lot.
I used to, yes.
Yeah, you used to bike. This is something I remember from when we all first started doing the Zoom. Didn't you have an incident when you were trying to fish and you biked to fishing or something like that? I could be totally mistaken, but didn't you crash drunkenly on your bike?
I did not crash. I made it home very safely.
Okay.
But I should not have been riding a bike because I did drink a 6-pack as a form of hydration on the beach.
Okay. Whatever happened to that bike? It got stolen, didn't it?
That bike got stolen. I got a new one.
Yeah, didn't you try to buy it back or you found it or something like that?
No, yeah.
What happened with that? That's an
Yeah,
interesting story.
that's a crazy story now that you bring it up. Yeah, so that was, we caught so during the pandemic there was a spike of bike thefts where they were like breaking into like garages and clearing out any bikes that they could find. And so yeah, these guys had they brought like portable angle grinders and were just like cutting every single lock in the garage and stealing all the bikes. And so we caught them on camera. Stealing all the bikes in the garage. My bike
And your
got
bike was
stolen.
one of them.
My bike was one of them. And then like the following week, I was
And
on
this
a
is in a
date.
garage. Was this in like an apartment complex or something?
Yeah, this was in our apartment building. We had like the lower floor was a garage, and so
Okay.
and it
Everyone
was like
had their bikes in there, and then they just
everyone
came
had
in
their
and
bikes
jacked it.
there, and yeah, and so everybody, we locked them up anyway because they still like would, even if the door was left open, they'd like jack them real quickly. That was like happened to my first bike actually.
Okay. God, San Francisco.
Yeah, no. And so like a week later, I'm on a date with this girl. We try to go to this bar that was still closed, and so we're like, all right, well, let's try to go somewhere else. And as we're waiting for an Uber, I hear like this homeless man like on a bike, like blaring music. I'm like, man, he's like enjoying his time, having a great time. And he's just like riding it along slowly, like probably high as a kite, whatever. Uber pulls up. As I'm getting into the car, the bike goes past me, and I'm like, "Hey, man, that's a really nice blue bike." And hey, that looks like the back end of my. Holy shit, that's my bike! What the shit? And so, like, as I'm getting into the Uber, I'm like screaming, "That's my bike!" And she's like, "Oh, you want to follow him?" I'm like, "Yeah, Uber man, follow him." And he's like, "I'm not doing that." And so I'm like, "Oh, okay, all right." Yeah, he like turned the corner and disappeared. And so that was the last day I ever saw it.
God.
So
I
it
remember
was
we were talking about
crazy.
that because I was like, wait, you found it? And you're like, well, I kind of found it, but then not so much.
And I was like, I knew, like, I'm sure there's a chop shop there. I know if I like wander around there, I'm sure I'll find it. And yeah, sure enough, it was like, fucking A.
That's hilarious. You so you did mention Vegas earlier. You did write down. Now this is a very kind of vague story. You just put a couple of key words, but something about the police department in Las Vegas and hotel security. Was this at the recent trip to Vegas, or was this way before?
This was a previous trip.
Okay, was this for work or for pleasure? Like, what were you doing?
This was for pleasure. Work
Okay.
has banned Las Vegas due to.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There was a certain scandal that happened a few years ago where a watchdog agency had spent a lot of money in Vegas. So as a result, no government agency is allowed to book in Vegas anymore.
Oh wow, I figured it was just because too many people were calling higher ups darling.
No,
See
we
what I
only
did
do
there?
that in Denver.
Hey-o.
And so yeah, I was solo. I think a friend of mine was like coming in the following day, so I was like, "Fuck it, I'm just gonna go try to meet some chicks at a bar, baby."
Yeah.
So I'm at this bar and end up talking to this woman who's she's apparently there with her friend who's like on a date there. So she was supposed to be her wingman or something like that, and so she's like alone and looking for dudes or whatever.
On the prowl.
Yeah, on the prowl. And so I end up like talking her up, and we end up closing down that bar. And her friend is like, yeah, no, she's actually my neighbor. I really don't know her that well, but whatever. We're just gonna have a good time. And her man friend seemed pretty cool, and we were both like sort of off doing our own things anyway. So we end up going to another bar, and me and this woman sit down next to this group of gay men. And she starts yelling at them some very derogatory things.
The girl that
like-
you're hanging out with.
Yeah, I think she's like, this is, it's an F word party. And I'm like,
What?
oh, okay.
You can't say that.
Yeah, you can't say that. And at this point, I will say, I'm pretty blitzed out of my mind. They're not
How
too
long
happy.
ago was this?
This was this 2014 maybe? Something
So
like that?
so way too late
Wait.
in the century to be saying stuff like that.
No, yeah, it was in the teens. You don't say that shit.
Yeah.
And so I'm just
I
kind
mean,
of
you
like,
should never say that stuff, but people listening know what I'm talking about.
no, yeah, exactly. And so I was kind of like, yeah, okay, I was drunk. I'm just gonna ignore that. Whatever. I'm drunk.
Yeah, you're drunk trying to get laid. You're just gonna let that one. You're gonna let that
I'm
one
just gonna
slide.
ignore that didn't happen. I'm just gonna keep
Yeah.
drinking. And she kind of and so they're just kind of like not happy with her. And then after a while, there's like a bunch of like servers are like sort of crowding around us. And then all of a sudden, the men in suits that are hotel security show up, and these are not like the guys you don't. The guy, I think the head of security was there, like this 7 foot tall giant brick of a man who's like, like if I poked him, I think I'd break my finger, like that kind of like dude.
Yeah,
he like
it's
walks
Vegas
over.
security. It's not fucking Daytona Beach security. It's
No,
Vegas
it's
security.
like it's the real guys, and I'm like kind of like sweating bullets all of a sudden, and they're like, man, you need to come over here. We need to talk to you. And so they take her away, and one of the guys comes over and is like, I did you a favor, buddy. I'm like, I don't know what's happening. Okay, what's going on? And they like take her outside the bar, and then shortly thereafter, Vegas PD shows up
Oh shit.
and escort her outside the hotel room, outside the hotel premises, and are now talking to her outside. And I'm just, head of security's still there, and I'm just like sweating bullets. I don't know what's going on. And after a while, Vegas PD comes back and is like, sir, we'd like to speak to you for a second. I'm like,
Oh, no.
I'm like, okay. And so like I put down my drink and I'm like shitting bullets. And they're like, oh, no, just bring a drink with you. It's totally fine. You're not in trouble. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, yeah, we just got a report that this is a lady of the evening. Have you been asked to exchange any services? I'm like, I literally met her and I don't know anything. Like, I just met her at the bar. Like, I don't know anything about no services. There was no discussion of that at all. And there wasn't. Like, genuinely, there wasn't. Like, well, that's a report we got, and we're not gonna. She's not allowed back in the hotel. So she's outside if you want to talk to her. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, just drunk out of her mind, screaming at the cops. And she's like, oh, you don't know who I am. Like, I'm gonna call 911. And she's like, no, ma'am. I've already called.
We are 911.
Yeah, we are. I'm already here. Like, you don't know. And he's like, no, this is ridiculous. Like, blah, like, she's going off on him. And then she's like, if you call 911, we're gonna have to arrest you, ma'am. And he's like, no, I'm gonna do it. And she does it. And like, all right, let's go. And I'm like, I'm out. I don't know what's going on.
I don't know her. I've never.
And
seen
so like
her
I
before.
left, and like when her friend and was like there, she's like, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know. Apparently there was like a report that she was somebody like trying to solicit. I don't know anything. I'm out. She's like, no, I don't think that's
do you think it was the guys called the cops and just made something up?
I think they probably reported her to like hotel security, and they don't fuck with that at all.
Yeah, because that's not legal inside of Vegas, correct?
Right.
That's hilarious. So they were like, oh, you want to call us that? Oh, we got something for you, you fucking prostitute.
Yeah.
And then they just called the hotel security.
Call the hotel security.
If that's how it worked out, that's hilarious.
Yeah, it was, and so yeah, he's like, yeah, I did. And so now, like, it all like afterwards, I was still like drunk, shitting bullets. Like, I'm like, I don't know what's happening. Am I gonna get arrested? What's happening? Now, in retrospect, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that guy really did do me a favor.
Yeah, for sure. And that's also something you can't argue with because it's not like drugs or a weapon where if it's either on you or it's not on you. Like if somebody calls the cops and says she was soliciting me, she's a prostitute inside the hotel. First of all, the hotel takes that super seriously, and they're like, no, get her out. So there's nothing, because of course she's going to say, no, I'm not a prostitute. But anybody in that situation would say, no, I'm not a prostitute.
Right.
So it's like there's nothing you can, like, you're just done. Like, that's
You're just
it.
done.
It's over.
Like, you can't fight it. Like, it's just like, no, don't even try. Like, just go home. At that point, just pack your shit, go home.
That's awesome, because there's nothing you can say. You're
Absolutely
just in it.
not. No.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was a roller coaster. It was a bit of a roller coaster.
God, that's hilarious.
But yeah.
Do you go to Vegas a lot?
Not often. I guess like once every like 2 years.
Okay.
I like end up going
How
to
far
Vegas
is Vegas
somehow.
from San Francisco? Do you fly in or do you
It's like
drive?
an hour flight. It's not too bad.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I know it's what, a 5-hour drive from L.A. That's kind of my bearings. But San Francisco's what, 4 hours from L.A.?
5 or 6 hours.
Okay, Jesus. So do you go to L.A. often, or do you only go for events and stuff?
Usually it was, before the pandemic, it was like once a year because either the AD or Mike, or even sometimes it was just like a conference that we had there once that I just like hung around LA. And I do have like a sort of a love affair with LA. It's like I do like it, like especially, I know a lot of people give me shit for it, but I love Venice Beach. I love how it's like just Berkeley, but with like beachfront property. So it's just like a bunch of like dirty homeless people and dirty hippies, and It's great.
Yeah, because you're the mayor of Dirty Hippie Town.
I mean, I spent
We've talked
my
about it
college
before.
years.
You.
Go Bears! Like I bleed blue and gold. So it's like I spent my time in Berkeley, and that's my, yeah. Like I said, go Bears! Like it's just I still have season tickets, baby. We might have going. We might have a season this year, so I'm super stoked for that.
Yeah, they're gonna have a season. College football's not slowing down.
I hope not.
God, I cannot. It's so interesting because when I think about what you do, I always think, I mean, obviously, aside from the podcasting, I always think like buttoned up, suit and tie. But for those of you listening, check out Farzad's Instagram or his Twitter. This is a man with big glasses and a giant beard and long hair. And you definitely, when I think, buttoned up corporate world, doing sciencey stuff, I'm always, and then I look at you telling stories about getting your bike stolen and going on dates and flirting with girls and stuff. I'm always like, wait, that's the same world. Those are the same people.
Yeah, no, we don't like. So actually, the funny thing is where I work is if you show up with like so much of a like button-up shirt, they're like, "What the fuck are you wearing?
Yeah,
you're way too formal right now." Like legit, like I think they actually asked my boss one time, was telling me a story about how they asked him like to put on jeans because he was way too formal.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So.
Well, so that's it's very interesting because the research world, like the world you come from, PhDs and masters and all that kind of stuff, it's very similar to the world I dabble in as far as being an artist, only because, and I use the term artist loosely, but because what we do, the mechanism we use to provoke whatever we're trying to provoke, in my case, it's human emotion. In your case, it's research, but it centers in our mind. So it doesn't, like, we're not in finance. Like, we don't have to dress up. We're not trying to impress anybody with how we look. We try to impress people with what we're trying to say, and in your case, what you're trying to discover. So it's interesting because my older brother, who I've talked about before, he's a PhD from Cornell, like super smart guy, but same kind of thing. Like, he'll wear like Birkenstocks and shorts and a t-shirt, and you're like, oh, this guy at one point was living in France trying to cure prostate cancer, and you would never guess by looking at him because you're just like, what is this hippie doing?
Yeah, most of this. Just take a look at how did Einstein dress? That's about the caliber of like your basic researcher.
Well, and it's interesting too because so I see it in the capacity that I'm in. So just from speaking on what I can speak on, so comedians always, for the most part, dress like slobs, but then the agents and the managers are always like sharp dressed suits because they're the ones who are basically frauds. Like they don't have any actual talent; they're representing the talent. So I would assume it's very similar in your world where the researchers, the discovery people are wearing whatever, and then it's the managers and the middle management and stuff that are all dressed up, and you're like, "Fuck you! You're a fucking idiot."
It's nearly identical. Unfortunately, most of the time that you can't really call them a fucking idiot because they like have they've done their PhD track, did their research, and then they're like, I'm gonna retire, just do management now, by just like.
Oh, okay. So they're actual. So in my case, what I was gonna say is a lot of times managers and stuff are failed comedians, but those are people who haven't failed; they just finished.
Yeah, they're just like they want to get more into like the moving money around to like other research. So they actually have to understand what we're like doing to be able to pitch it to other people.
See, I thought it was very much like they're like in a hospital, like there's administrators and then there's actual health, healthcare workers. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a difference. Like there's people who manage it and then there's people who actually do something. I thought it was similar in your field where there's people who actually do the research and then there's people who just have like an administrative background. But those people actually know what they're talking about.
Yeah, they have to get their feet wet in actual research to be able to like understand, okay, this is what's happening. And they like have to, at least from our side, they have to hustle to get us money, right? So they have to like be able to do like
wine
2-minute pitches.
Dine. Yeah, I've seen the Big Bang Theory. I know how it works.
Yeah. Oh boy. Just get me triggered, why don't you?
Oh man, but this is the last story that you did send me, but it's pretty hilarious. You were talking about a friend. You got your friend's husband way too high.
Indeed. So this was
set this whole thing up because this is interesting to me.
Yeah, so this is at my old apartment. I was hosting a Friendsgiving. I had smoked a turkey that was actually really delicious. Even my buddy, who's like a very harsh critic, was like, "This is the best turkey I've had. It's very moist, very good." It's like anyway. Sorry, I won't get off on the food.
Had to throw that in there.
Sorry, I had to throw it in there. And so at the end of the night, I was like, "Hey, who wants to smoke some of the devil's lettuce?" And my friend and her husband were like, this was like their. Give some backstory. They recently had moved from. They're originally from Ukraine. Had just moved to the Bay Area, and so this was like their first like American experience. Where I'm like, yes, come over, have Thanksgiving.
And
it's
I was
American.
gonna say Thanksgiving. That's the most American.
Yeah, you gotta have the most American experience. This was like the first time we were all like hanging out together, and so like it's at the end of the night. Pull out the devil's lettuce, and like we'll come up and try. And so, we went outside, and so the way that that apartment was set up, there was an outdoor patio. Which was, I'm sure you remember, that was where I like zoomed all the time.
Yeah, that's where you always were on the Zoom calls. Yeah, for sure.
And so there's two sets of stairs. One set of stairs goes up to a large garden patio that's open for everybody in the building, and another set of stairs that goes down into the aforementioned garage.
Yeah.
So we go up into the like big garden area for the building. There's like a table there. We all sit down. I load up a bong, and I take a hit, pass it to my friend. She like sniffs it. She's like, "Nope, I'm sorry, I can't do this." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, no pressure." So she goes down, goes back inside. Her husband takes a hit, and then we pass it on to like everybody else at the party. And so we do a round around. She goes, and he's standing up, and he's just like, "Yeah, I don't feel anything. I don't think I got anything." We're like, "All right, well, here, take a second hit."
Yeah, okay.
And so he takes a second hit. He's like, "Oh, I feel it." We're like, "Yeah, you do, bro." And so like he's just standing there, and then he goes like, all of a sudden he just goes like, I can't move." We're like, "It's okay, buddy. You're just high. Just put one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
Here's a chair.
Breathe.
Sit down.
Here we go,
Just breathe. And let me get you a glass of water. You want some water?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And he grabs the bong. I'm like, no. You don't want to. Don't drink that. Don't drink that. Let's just sit here. Put your head down. Breathe. I'll go relax. I'll get you some water. I run downstairs, grab a glass cup, which wasn't smart. You'll find out here in a bit. Get him some water, and he's just drinking it. Keep minding his own business. We're just like talking, doing whatever. And all of a sudden, he just like bolts up and just starts running towards the stairs and is running down the stairs. And I'm like, "Oh, buddy, be careful." And so I hear like running, and then all of a sudden I hear boom, and then the sound of broken glass.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh, fuck, what just happened?" So I run down there, and he's just kind of like, looking around, kind of like crazy.
Is he on the ground? Is he standing up? What's happening?
He's kind of like stumbling. He's like on the ground. He's just gotten up, and there's glass everywhere because the glass cup that I had given him. And I'm like, "Hey, man, you okay?" And he just like slowly turns around, looks at me and goes, "Da." And then starts screaming in Russian. And
Ukrainian,
I'm like,
but yeah.
No, this was specifically Russian.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they speak both.
Yeah.
And so he's screaming something in Russian. My friend runs out. She's like, "What's going on?" He starts screaming at her in Russian. I'm like, "Hey, I don't know what's happening right now."
That's so terrible because technically it's kind of your fault. And
exactly.
But it's not your fault. Like, handle your fucking drugs. But at the same time, it's kind of like, I did give it to him. So you're in that weird spot where it's like, I'm
responsible for this now. Yeah. So they she takes him upstairs. They go into my room. They're in there for a while. And after a bit, she comes out. She's like, "Yeah, he's not calming down. I don't know what to do. I think we should call an ambulance." And I'm like,
no.
"Oh, no, it's fine. He's just got a really bad trip. He needs to sleep it off." And then someone at the party's like, "Well, he did fall. He could have hit his head. He could have a concussion."
Oh,
so
stop being such babies.
We should be careful. I'm like, "All right, fine. Call 911. So we call 911. They show up.
This is when the weed is legal, though, in California, correct? So you're not going to get in trouble?
Was weed? It had just passed, but it wasn't legal.
Okay, gotcha.
Like it was still medically legal at the time.
Yeah. But it had passed, but it hadn't been enacted into law.
Hadn't been enacted yet. And so paramedics show up. He can't like walk, so it takes like 3 guys, one on each arm and one to carry his legs out. They load him up in the back of the ambulance, and they're like, the paramedics are like chatting me up, like, listen, man, you're not in trouble. Just tell me what you did, like what it was. I'm like, it was just
what you did. No. Let's all take
Exactly.
a step back. This
I
is a
swear to
grown
God,
ass man.
He was like, it's just some wine and some marijuana. That's all it was. I bought it from such and such store. Like, it's all legal. Like, it's all above board. Nothing like street shit. He's like, dude, it was laced with anything? I'm like, absolutely not. It was nothing. It's just weed. I'm like, they're like, all right, we believe you. And I'm like, all right, well, like, is this normal? Like, do you see this shit all the time? Like, oh yeah, we do. We see this shit all the time.
Really?
They're like, people can't handle their weed, and they just like freak the fuck out. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so they haul him off to the hospital. After like a few hours, they release him and they go home. The next time I see my friend, like a few days later, she goes, oh, do I have a story for you?
What
And
happened?
she tells me his perspective. So apparently, when he was like, had his head down and was just like drinking the water, he was like, man, I am way too high. How do I stop myself from getting this high? Well, if I go back in time, I'll be able to stop myself and I'll tell myself not to get this high. Well, how do I go back in time? I'll just retrace my steps really fast. And I'm like,
oh my God! So that's what was
you know
going
what?
through his
High
head?
logic, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows about what is it, Superman 2? where he
Superman,
spins-
right?
Yeah.
He just went around backwards a bunch of times and he went back in time. So that's all he had to do. So that was why he was bolting as fast as he could down the stairs. But then when he tripped and fell, he thought he had died.
Oh, really?
And when he woke up, when he like turned around and saw that everything was still the same, he thought he was he thought he was locked in purgatory. So that's what he
that's
was
why he
screaming
freaked
in
out,
Russian,
yeah.
apparently. Because he's like, I'm locked in purgatory. Oh God! And then when they were in my room, he's also like a coder, so he was like, he saw like a book on HTML, and he's like, of course this is purgatory. Of course this is purgatory. I'm stuck coding HTML for the rest of my life.
Oh,
This
God.
is the worst. It doesn't stop there. Apparently, they get him to the hospital, they have him hooked up to an IV, and he's just like relaxing. He's chill, and all of a sudden he like bolts up, rips the IV out of his arm, and starts running down the hallway, screaming in English this time. Apparently, I'm going to kill El Diablo. And as he's like, they're like chasing him down the hallways in the hospital, he like sees a Hispanic-looking orderly, stops, points at him, and goes, "You know what I'm talking about."
What?
And that's when they like tackle him, and they like have to like restrain him and stuff. And then eventually, like he calms down enough where they like he finally is released. But she's like, yeah, he's never touching weed ever again. Fuck that shit.
Yeah, that's insane. I've done a lot of different drugs, and never once have I had that kind of reaction ever.
I've done weed a lot, and it's never had that bad of a reaction. I've had bad reactions, but not that one.
Yeah, but that sounds like something you like a reaction you would have to like bath salts, or which is the fake Molly from China, or you know,
like PCP or something.
Yeah, PCP, angel dust, something like that. I've been around a lot of weed smokers in my life, and I've tried it a few times, and never once have I seen anything like that. That's like some next level kind of shit.
I mean, the strain was called Romulan, so maybe he did picture himself as a Romulan.
Yeah, when this is a little Star Trek reference. This is a Star Wars only podcast, though. So on that note, we're gonna end it there. No, I'm just, but for real, we are coming to that point. Plug everything one more time, Farzad. Let everyone know where they can find you, the podcast, the network, the whole deal.
Yeah, you can find me at Doing It for Science on all social media. You can follow the podcast at A New Low Pod on all social media. Our website is anewlow.co, where you can find all of our podcasts. That includes A New Low, our flagship, Who Does a Pod, our musical podcast, Cheers from the Press Box, featuring yours truly, Brennan, and Joe, and Misbehavior Journal Club, which is our neuroscience podcast.
Boom. You sounded like you were reading it from a script, baby. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening. Follow me on all social media again, Brennan T. Comedy, BrennanTComedy.com. Going to have some dates coming up here in the city. Once I kind of get a little more settled, give me another week, and we'll start putting some dates up. Thank you again, everybody, so much for listening. Patreon.com/BrennanTassif. Get your ex-drinking buddy merch, and we will talk to y'all next week.
See ya.